Okay. Good morning, class. This is the week following Chuseok or Thanksgiving, back at East Asian International Management class. This week we're talking about the Chinese management. We have already talked about basic management theories. We talked about cultural differences. We've talked about Sun Tzu, The Art of War. We started to talk about the idea of Guanxi. We defined Guanxi. We had a few students present so far. This week, we're going to be going in and talking more about Chinese management. But the focus is working together. The focus is Guanxi, what we talked about last chapter. You should all know what Guanxi is, and I don't know if it's true or not, but you should at least be considering that having a close relationship with me might be good for your future. So contact me, show me what you're working on, show me what you have found, which would obviously make you look great, but also show me what you can't find or problems. Use Guanxi and benefit from my experiences. Ask favors from me. So this is not just a simple idea. I want you all to do this together, get Guanxi with each other. It will help you do your class projects, and it may help you get jobs and develop in the future. So please stay very well connected in Facebook and social media. We're going to talk about that today. Any questions going forward? Are there any students that are ready to present some of this information? I don't see anybody's hand up, so I'll take that as a no. I'm going to go through a few of the students and just check. What about Shokabos, Almuratov? Do you have any questions about the course yet? Or do you have any comments that you would like to share as far as your projects, the weekly project or your term project? Because we need to present that before week 8, including today. Okay, Shokabos, no comment. What about next one up? Shiraz Hassan, any comments from you? No comments from Shiraz. Okay, Juksong, any comments from you?
For now, before the class, I had a question, but I think my question is not really related to today's topic. So can I ask this after the class?
You can ask it right now. I'm giving you an opportunity to develop Guanxi. In Korea, you know your culture is associated with a very high uncertainty avoidance.
Okay, so my question was related to the Chinese family business while preparing the presentation last week. Well, actually, our group was the group that prepared the presentation, but while dealing with our topic, I just came with a question. What would the difference between the, as you mentioned last week, Chinese family business is not we introduced that most of Chinese family business are made out of small company members, but not all of them. There are some big Chinese family businesses as well. So I was wondering that then what would be the difference between the big Chinese family business and Korea's concept of chaebol or Japan's chaebots?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. The more you ask questions to other people, the more you network with other people, the more you develop your Guanxi, the better you will be. So I really appreciate you for asking that. If you see me in the hallways, maybe I can buy you a coffee or a beer or something. The idea is, for your question is there a difference between small businesses and big businesses? And you were focused on China, but I have worked with quite a few companies and quite a few countries, and I know that people stereotype, I know people generalize to help them understand, but when you get into the research shows similarities everywhere. So small businesses and large businesses, many times they're operated the same way, which means that a person comes up with an idea that is usually one person, one leader will start a company, and then he will get some other people to help them. Well, you are most comfortable with your family and people around you, your close friends. So usually those are the people you talk to. And the Chinese today and in the past were no different. So usually individuals start businesses. They start small. That's the normal way to do it. But increasingly in 2020, you realize that you have access to millions or billions of dollars. Microsoft and Google, Tesla, they're trillion-dollar companies now, and they grew, some of them grew really, really fast. So they're not normal, but the way that they're developing is possible with anybody. You can make a business plan and get crazy big investment and maybe go on to the stock market and raise millions or billions of dollars. So we know that's not the typical easy way to do it, but if you do that with a lot of money, you will use lots of money to hire some of the best staff in the world. So that is a part of reality everywhere. Many people forget that, and they think, oh, Chinese are just run by family businesses, or Chinese are just poor people that have poor products, cheap products. But most of the biggest companies in the world nowadays are Chinese. And it's the biggest country in the world with the biggest population in the world. And almost all people are fairly similar. They start with the people around them to grow an idea. And very rarely, they might get huge investments and hire professional experts. But as soon as they get lots and lots of crazy amounts of money, then they might hire other experts. So to summarize, your question was, as I understand, what's the difference between small businesses and the big businesses in China, and are they similar to companies like the Chaebol in Korea or the Zaibatsu or Keiretsu in Japan? The answer is yes. Samsung started with the Samsung family managing people around them, and then they got connections with the government and they were able to hire lots of people. Hyundai started with the Hyundai family managing people around them. The Japanese started hiring their family and people around them, and they grew incredibly fast. The Chinese are a little more interesting. Perhaps their case is easy to see, that we'll talk about today. They start generally as poor people trying to start an idea, and they expand that idea usually easier outside of their normal hometown or their home country, and then they grow. And they continue to use their Guanxi, which is connections with family, connections with friends, favors with other people, to grow. And one thing that is unique about the Chinese compared to American management is the Chinese were growing up in the 1930s and 40s with the Chinese environment in turmoil. Many people were super poor. And so they left the country looking for food, looking for jobs, looking for money. And when they went into these other countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, surrounding China, they were also treated like poor outsiders, and they were kind of tortured. So their difference is they provided their products almost for free, just for a very small profit, to make friends with the local businesses, make friends with the local governments, make friends with the local powerful people. And by having a very low profit, that allowed the local person to fall in love with them, and the local person could have as much profit as they wanted. In North America and in Europe, it's usually quite different. A lot of companies in North America and in Korea and Japan now charge a very high price, especially in North America. So if you take a small pen or a chopstick, for example, chopsticks made in China cost maybe 1 penny, and they will sell it for 1 penny and a half, just a half a penny profit. But in maybe New York, it might cost you $10 for a set of chopsticks or a pen. And that is the main way that the Chinese grew, and they grew differently than the American or the Chinese grew differently, a little bit differently than the Korean and the Japanese. Korean and Japanese had a little bit higher profit margins, and they were promoting themselves a little bit more when they were abroad. That was a very long answer. Does that help, Juk Song?
Yes, thank you, Professor.
Are you going to be able to share your research today, or are you going to wait until next week or the final last-minute deadline?
Well, I think I'd like to share my presentation on the 7th week.
Oh, terrible, terrible, terrible. You just want to wait until the last minute. You're falling into the Korean classic of avoiding uncertainty. Let me help repeat. Maybe Hibin So, can you repeat to the class, Miss So, what is the setup, or how are people supposed to be thinking when they're presenting their research before week 8? Are they supposed to be wearing tuxedos and have gold and diamond presentations?
No, it's going to be like a casual information sharing meeting, so we can share our lack of the knowledge and share what we've done so far. So we don't have to be pressure on like being perfect presentation, but we can be honest on what we've done, and we can show the weakness each other and then help each other.
Yes, so the overall idea is to realize that you're all having difficulty, you're all struggling, you all have questions, just like the Chinese back in the 1930s and 40s. And the Chinese left their hard environment, but they did it while they stayed in touch with everybody around them. And they shared their difficulty, and that sharing of information and sharing of products allowed them to become very, very successful. So yes, thank you for that. Kenakdo, you just joined the class now. Do you have any questions about the weekly topic of Chinese management earlier project, or do you have any questions about, or would you like to share your research that you found so far? I'm trying to give away free points.
Well, I'm trying to get to the point, but I actually want to know more about the Guanxi's two-phase.
Okay, the Guanxi generally have two aspects of face that relate together. When you're trying to develop your relationship with other people, number one, you have to be polite. If you're an SOB, the other person's not going to want to help you, right? So you have to be polite. And the other thing is, the better you look as far as social status, sometimes the easier it is for other people to want to work with you. For example, in Samsung and Hyundai, especially with Samsung, they almost have an unwritten rule that Samsung must work with the top companies in their industry. If you are not the top most respected company, Samsung might not want to work with you. You might not be able to even supply Samsung with products. They want to appear to be the best. So Guanxi is related to that. You have to be polite. So it's etiquette is one aspect of face, and the other aspect of face is your image or social status. So try to appear to have a image that is attractive to the person you want to develop the relationship with. So whoever you want the Guanxi with, try to guess what that person likes and wants and needs, and provide something for them. Be polite and provide that image in order to help them. Does that answer your question, Hinato?
Yes, but Professor, I actually learned about Guanxi that Guanxi was kind of internal and private relationship with Chinese company or like Chinese CEO.
I don't understand your question. So Chinese developed Chinese CEOs, is that what you're saying?
Because what I know is a little bit different from what you have just said. Because Guanxi, in my perspective, was that it's a kind of internal and very private relationship that you have made with another person or another group that would make your business more flexible or something.
It has to go, yes, that's absolutely correct. So Guanxi is a personal relationship with somebody. Yes, it's a personal relationship of favors. That's correct. So you don't want the world to know that you have special connections with other people. You want the world to think you are just a small, simple person, because people like Jeff Bezos, they're so big, they're so rich, that other people will try to insult them and sue them or have problems with them to attack them, because regular people are jealous of the big, powerful person. So with Guanxi, you try to have relationships with many people, especially the powerful people, but you must keep that secret. So you get the relationship by being polite with them and having a good social status with them. But yes, you don't brag to the rest of the world where you get your discounts. You don't brag to the world in order for helping you grow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I've asked a few people in class so far. Some people might not, they might have started their Zoom, but they weren't here. What about Ho-Jin Chun? Do you have any questions? Or Gunsu Kim or Ji-Hwan So? Do you have any questions?
I have question.
Okay, go ahead.
Actually, I'm just curious. Can I share my screen just a second for me, please?
Just a sec. Yes, you can.
Please about the research paper.
Okay.
Of course, I
Awesome.
heard.
This is
Can
what
you
I
see
want to
my
see.
screen now?
Yes, I can. Effective leadership and joint ventures in Vietnam. Awesome.
Oh, so I heard that you said before the Hyundai in Vietnam wasn't so successful and it was terrible, and so it just triggered my interest, and I found this and I read through it, and it says the um each many each country's manager's perspective on goal was different. Like yeah, so they have Vietnam has their own goal standard, and it was completely different with those other countries. And so for the if I can use this research, um, research paper, I would like to use it, and I can with combining with those Vietnam culture and Vietnam business protocol. We want to analyze the overall. We also want to analyze the overall economic factors and environment in Vietnam to see how can the how say Korean company can success in Vietnam in the Vietnam market. So we want to we want to research about it. So if someone have any idea on the Vietnam, then I would be appreciate if you share it with me. So
Okay. Can you show the class the title of your paper again? The top part. Great. So what I want the class to do now is to think together about what you're talking about. Anybody that has information about Vietnam, please share this with Guanxi Kim. But at the same time, can somebody else, not Mr. Kim, can somebody else comment, is this good to use for research, bad to use for research? He asked one question, is it okay to use this? So what are we looking at here? Can somebody help identify what is good and bad about this? How about Jihuan So? No comment from Jihuan So?
Yes.
I asked a question. I'm waiting for you to comment on this, what he's using. Is this good? Is it bad? What can you check? What can you see from Guanxi Kim's article, Effective Leadership and Joint Ventures in Vietnam?
I think it's good to use.
Okay, good. I'll help everybody, but can you explain why? Or are you just flipping a coin? Is that why I heard the doing? You flipped the coin.
No. I think it looks like a credible source.
Why? What looks credible? Because it's in black and white and it's not in purple and pink. If it was in purple and pink, you would say it's garbage. I want people to practice saying whatever they can think, even if they don't know. And if you don't know, say, I don't know. Guess. I want people to guess together. In Korea, you have a very high likelihood of avoiding things you don't know. And you must overcome that if you want to be successful in international management. So I want you to use our class to practice guessing, practice learning from mistakes.
Because the source is School of Management, Asian Institute of Technology, and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, the person that wrote it is in the Asian Institute of Technology school. Okay. Any other comments? Thank you. Can you pick one other student to also guess?
I picked Hyun Hak-do.
Okay.
Yes, Professor, since that's from, well, let me just guess that it's from International Monetary Fund. So I think that's quite credible for the use of writing the paper.
Okay, so you like government organizations. Well, Donald Trump is part of a government organization. Do you trust everything that you hear from Donald Trump?
But since everything that he speaks from his mouth is gonna be the official idea from his government, right? So it's highly credible, I believe.
Donald Trump is credible? Is that what you're saying? Okay, wow. Okay, my point is most organizations promote themselves. The few organizations that only promote things that are pure or correct are the Scopus journals or the Web of Science journals, because they require everything that is written to be checked by other experts, and the other experts will delete it or refuse it if there's any mistakes or lies or any problems in their thinking style. So using a Scopus or Web of Science journal article is a good way to find true information. Now, I want you guys to check. Gunsu Kim, can you go to the show? Where was this written? Where was this published?
Where this was published?
Yes, the title is Effective Leadership in Joint Ventures in Vietnam, A Cross-Cultural Perspective. That's the name of the story, and it was written by two guys, but where was it published? It was not published by IMF, and it was not published by the Asian Institute of Technology School. It was just two strangers that were in those places. They got together and they wrote this.
I mean, actually, I would like to know whether I can use this to support how Korea business can success in Vietnam markets. And I actually got these PDF files from you, the extra info references.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
and
You got it from me, but my question was, can you go up and down on this PDF? Because right now we do not see the name of the magazine. Maybe if right there, the bottom right corner, can you zoom in on that? That is the name of the magazine.
Journal
so it says,
Change Management.
Yes, the Journal of Organizational Change Management. That is kind of a famous journal. So that is what is respected. The writers are only respected because they were published in there. So that journal had two other experts check the information, make sure it's true, and then they got published. We don't know if we can always trust the writers unless they are checked by the journal. So thank you. Your article is good. You can definitely use that. That's Scopus article. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to jump into the course now. Any other questions before we look at Chinese management?
Professor, can I ask you for one question?
You sure can.
Because so far, Ho-Jin Chan and I've done an interview with the person in the agricultural field in Korea, like who's running a farm for the shine muscat, which is a fruit, and we found out that still in Korean agricultural industry, we have a cultural differences, like collective culture. There is a traditional way to share our labor, like pumashi and ture, which is really traditional in Korea. However, and also this kind of collective culture is changing into an individual one, and we felt that this is really interesting, and it would be really helpful to let Google to find out the strategies to get into the Korean agricultural industry. But the problem is that the references are not, first of all, the references are not available in English, most of the references. So can we use like Korean references
Absolutely. You can use Korean references, you can use English references, you can use German, French, Swahili, you can use any language you want, but because our paper is going to be in English, make sure you show the main content translated into English. So
okay.
if you want to quote something, you can quote it in Korean and then say right beside it, this means this. Like pegopa in Korean means hunger or hungry in English. And then your reference, you can write the reference in Korean, but also translate the main point of your reference into English.
Okay, and for the interviews, do we have to get do we have to submit kind of, how can I say, like official references from them, like maybe like letter of the consent or something, or citating?
The highest quality researchers in the world, they know that some people worry about privacy, and so they check whoever they're interviewing and they ask, is it okay to publish this? Do you consent to have your quotes used in an article? Or can I take a photo of you and put a photo of you in the news? And the person that you're interviewing will say yes or no. If they don't want to be famous or quoted, then you can ask them if it's okay to, we will use your information, but we will not, we will keep your name secret, like a confidential source. And usually that is okay. That is the highest level of research. And that is the most level of professionalism and respect. But for my class, I don't really require that. If you do it, perfect. It's an extra bonus points. Most people in Korea still don't really care too much, especially if you're interviewing, I think you said agricultural farmers or something like that. Maybe they don't care too much about where their words go or who uses their quotes. So you can get around it, but it is best if you do get consent from them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it would be better if we can submit the letter of the consent. Is that clear for the answer?
If you get a consent from them to use the information for your research purposes, yes, that's best.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. So I'm starting to show the chapter now. And we've just heard from 2 students that are not only presenting their research, which you should get points for that. Make sure, Gunsu Kim and Heben So, make sure you put points next to your weekly contribution. And because that is your research paper, you have already presented part of your information. You were initially planning to present in week 7, but you already have points for it now. So next week you can present more, and later you can present more, and you can keep getting points. But also remember that just like the overseas Chinese, they were tortured. They were in a very, very hard situation when they started. And our start with coronavirus and our start with the working online with Zoom, it might have been difficult for some people, and getting your marks is the same way. I'm not going to just easily give marks away and sign them up for you. You should chase them down and try to get the marks yourself. Make sure you record marks when you are participating in your weekly activities and for your research term paper info update. Does that make sense, Ms. So and Mr. Kim?
Yes.
So in the Excel file, make sure you record points and maybe share some sort of comments so we remember how you got those points. Now, let's talk about this overseas Chinese. The origins of overseas Chinese. Generally, a long, long time ago, there was the collapse of the Qing dynasty, and that made a lot of the people to leave that area, and it reached its peak towards the end of the 19th century. There was another exodus, 1930s and 40s, when China suffered a lot of problems inside China. People were starving, people were dying, and we also had the Japanese invasion, so we had foreign soldiers killing people and civil wars. So some Chinese left China to start to survive. So that's one of the beginnings. Hopefully, my class is not as bad as environment as that. Hopefully you don't see anybody trying to kill you, but you may think some things are strange with the management. Next, in the earlier period, the overseas Chinese population in Southeast Asia was very small. So of course, just like most countries, most people stay in their home. Most people stay in their home city. Most people stay in their home country. Only when you get very developed or when you're a very strange free thinker, you will start to check out new environments and leave your home area. Most people do stay in their home area. So it was a very small population that left China and started growing abroad. So in the mid-18th century, the number of Chinese immigrants began to substantially increase. Most of them were refugees, farmers, merchants, artisans, laborers. Chinese were imported or sometimes kidnapped or smuggled into the region as slave laborers. And this PPT, as you can see, is available on in our folder, and there's several different notes here. So as we go through it, it's anybody can present this information, but make sure that you're aware what is good, what's bad. Some people shared information surveying farmers, which is good. Some people share information from Facebook, which is good. That's new information. Some people share information from writers from the IMF or other schools, which is good, but it's best to have very reliable information that's checked by experts like Scopus Materials. And when you're going through the PPT, try to show what information is really good, reference properly. So why did they emigrate? The major reason was economic pressure and domestic hardship. The overseas Chinese, they came to Southeast Asia, not as traders, but as laborers. They were starving and dying and being killed in China. So they left their home to try to live somewhere else. And if you're not very rich, you just cross the border into surrounding countries. So Vietnam is right beside China. Thailand is also right beside. Myanmar is right beside. Philippines, Indonesia is not very far away. So those are the areas where Chinese started to expand into. And an analysis of the overall operational environment of the overseas Chinese in Southeast Asia, we are focused on Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. So when we're checking that, we see that almost everybody started in economic hardships or domestic hardships. So they were not Jeff Bezos traveling the world in Lear jets all the time. In Indonesia, for example, the new Indonesian economy was led by Suharto, which several people say was a harsh dictator, but that dictator helped the Chinese to grow. Why? Because the Chinese had contacts. They did their research before they came. They found who had factories in China, who had farms in China, who had the ability to make products or services in China. And then when he came to Indonesia, they showed this president, hey, if you need something in your country, maybe I can give it to you from my family and friends back in China. They developed Guanxi. And that obviously helped Indonesia. It helped Suharto grow his country. There were also Muslim-based successive Indonesian governments adopted afterwards in a series of discriminated governmental policies. So after this, there were a lot of efforts to try to keep the Chinese down or stop the flow of immigrants. They were expelling Chinese and they were actually murdering Chinese people. That concept is fairly similar. That's what Donald Trump might be associated with now. He thinks that United States has difficulty So he doesn't want any more foreigners coming in, and he's banning them. Even his vice president has put in a travel ban now for foreigners coming into the United States. So Korea also, I believe for 500 years, Korea prevented foreigners from coming into Korea. And if we look at Korea, even though this is where we're based, Korea is still more than 90%, more than sometimes 98% only Korean, which means it's not that easy for foreigners to be here. So there's a lot of similarities. Next, the Chinese invested in heavy industries in Indonesian economy secretly. So they were working for these companies, and when they started to make money, they were using their money to invest back, maybe help the owners grow this business, showing that they're very, very helpful. If they had profits that they made and they were helping good business people grow, those powerful people would become secret friends, and you would have that Guanxi with them to grow. The Chinese also played a role in financing the military. So because the government was most powerful and the military was the most powerful part of the government, they made friends with those people first. So when you are interested, for example, the student, hey Bin So, you are a young student, you want to become very successful, you should find where do you want to work, who is successful and powerful in that area, how can you contact them? So it's great, you already started that. You researched who is active there and you've started to contact them. Hopefully, we all know that you should go to those people when you have something to give. So research, find good information, or find articles, or find secret information, or maybe volunteer to work, maybe for free. Use your class project. Use me as a researcher. You can say, I'm working with you to help find solutions and ways to help that company or that organization. And so Hey Bin So contacted some people and were able to interview them that way. Same thing. So the Chinese, they started by helping provide loans, and in exchange for these loans, they got political protection, and they got licenses to do business, and they got monopolies to develop companies. These close ties with the foreign capital via joint ventures. Sometimes it's not that individual going to Indonesia. Maybe Hey Bin So has never been to Indonesia, but maybe she knows somebody that is successful, or she knows of the Shinhan Bank Group or the Kookmin Bank Group, and she can introduce people in Indonesia to those banks. And that introduction, that agency, is so valuable that the Indonesian people will help them grow. And that's a good example of what they did. And that's that aspect of being a middleman or a financier, that's called the Kutong system. So we talked about the Indonesia, and now we're talking about Philippines. What happened in the Philippines? This says it's almost the same as Indonesia. Indonesia had a dictator, and they were actually being kind of harsh to foreigners at the time. So after the Philippines required the Chinese workers to be cheap laborers, they used that cheap work to benefit the Spanish colonial authorities. Then they moved their network into the government, and then the Chinese in the Philippines helped the Spanish rulers, then they helped the Philippine government, then they helped the Philippine military with their labor. So they identify who should we get the Guanxi with, and they develop relationships that way. You young students, you have an enormous potential. You have more potential to be more successful than Bill Gates ever did. When Bill Gates was born, the world was still not completely open. We didn't have iPhones and cell phones. You do now, and you can travel relatively easy apart from the coronavirus. And you can do Zoom education and contacting people online very easily. So you have more potential to expand than others. So use your class, use your projects, use your opportunities to start growing your future now. Do not just wait until tomorrow. Do not wait until you graduate. These Chinese people grew from their environment, even though it was very harsh. Start targeting who are the people you want to work with. Surround yourself with the best people you can, whether it's the Spanish colonial authorities or the Philippine government or the military. Surround yourself with people that you think are the best around. Next, although the Chinese in the Philippines were very small, their economic power is incredibly large. I want you guys to know by the end of today why. Why are the Chinese getting so powerful, getting so wealthy? And I've already started to share the answer. You must guess at what you can do with that. You know they have good contacts. What are you going to do with those contacts? Let's continue. Since the independence of the Philippines, successive governments have adopted a series of measures to prevent Chinese from acquiring economic power or citizenship. So just like Indonesia, the Chinese came in when it was hard to come in. And even after they got there, some people tried to kick them out or kill them. It's not always easy. Make sure you're aware of that. The secret seems to be in your thinking style. Think of the big picture. How can you promote yourself mutually beneficially with the big picture? So the following governments in the Philippines, they prohibited alien Chinese commercial activities through complicating the naturalization process for ethnic Chinese. I am one of the first non-Koreans to set up a non-Korean invested and non-Korean owned business in all of South Korea. Do you realize when I made a company in Korea, I actually had to break the law in order to follow the law? Wow, I'm surprised. No questions for you. You guys are a hard audience. Okay, hopefully somebody's going to ask a question about that because that's part of what we're teaching here. Again, I will repeat. I started one of the first businesses, non-Korean owned and operated businesses here. My business registration number was like 000001. And to start, I had to start illegally. So maybe you guys want to ask questions about it. I'm perfectly willing to share that. It's been in the newspaper. Anyway, next, despite all these hardships, a study in 1982 revealed that Filipino Chinese owned more than 33% of the top manufacturing firms, or 43% of the top commercial firms. So even though these Chinese in Indonesia and the Philippines had very hard conditions, they started to become very powerful economically. That's a big difference to me. I'm not very powerful economically. Malaysia. The Chinese in Malaysia comprised a much larger portion of the total population, but they have very limited direct access to political power. So while Indonesia and the Philippines was different, there's only a very small number of Chinese. In Malaysia, there was quite a lot of Chinese, but there was still racial discrimination. It was very intense in Malaysia. So the few numbers of Malaysian nationals, they made the government, so only those few pure Malaysians could be the rulers, and they made laws that were racially discriminatory against the Chinese. For example, in 1969, there were ethnic riots. The new economic policy in 1971. Also, Chinese influence in Malaysian economy, even though there were more Chinese, it's huge. 60% of the Chinese control the economy. Any questions, comments? You guys, I find this really, really interesting, and yet you guys are a hard audience. You should be asking questions. How can you go from being a young student that might be poor to be successful? How can you learn from this? What are the secrets to their success? No questions. Any questions for me? Wow, harsh students. Okay, I heard somebody try to ask a question. Who was that?
Oh, it's Julian.
Oh, okay, Julian. Julian, you have any comments to share?
So I've heard about these difficulties that the Chinese had in Malaysia, Indonesia, and I've heard about these riots against them. So how do they manage to still get in this position of not maybe power from an economic point of view, regardless these bans?
Okay, so hopefully you guys, your question is, how did the underdog, how did the small individual person that left poverty and left their home, how did they become very successful? That's your question?
Somehow like this. So it was maybe because the local they were corrupted. I mean, the local governments. So they were doing something. I mean, saying something but doing different, or not enforcing the laws, or was something else?
Yes, yes, and yes. The reality everywhere in the world is usually the same, especially in Korea. We have a developed country, technically in Korea, but we just heard from one student, Haebin So, she said that the parts of agriculture are not developed here. So there are some things that are developed, some things that are not. And that goes the same everywhere. There are some laws that are developed and written down here, but we still don't follow them. You can see this picture. I'm showing a pen right now. Let's try to imagine if we didn't have coronavirus, I could see all of you and drink coffee or beer or see all of you in class. And what I usually do, I want you to imagine. I would put you into a few groups. 10 students over here, 10 students over there, 10 students in a different group, 3 different groups. 9 of you are the locals. 9 of you are Indonesian people. 9 of you in a different group are from Philippines and so on. And only 1 of you in the group is the foreigner. You're the Chinese, or in Korean we call you're the wangta. You're the crazy foreigner. Now, in your group, just like any country, you have to develop. And so the basics of developing is you need to make new plans. So you have maybe your books and papers, but there's not many of them. And you realize back in Indonesia and the Philippines, many years ago, they didn't have factories that make books, and they didn't have pens. But that one Chinese person, he brought books, paper, or some people say was invented in China. Pens maybe were invented in China. They knew they could get them from their friends back in China, and it only cost maybe 1 won or 1 cent. And so the Chinese people, number one, they were all by themselves, surrounded by locals that didn't trust the other guy. The locals were poor, the Chinese was poor, the locals wanted to become powerful, so they started to push the Chinese out, saying, "Oh, no, you guys, you're crazy, who are you, get out of here." But at the same time, he saw at the back of the group, people were starting to make plans. And he said, "Hi, I see that you guys, the powerful people, you are actually making plans now. I can give you a book. I can give you a pen to write this down," because they didn't have it locally. And so the local people said, okay, so you are good. But the Chinese guy said, whoa, just a second. I can keep giving it to you, but I want you to realize I'm helping you, so please help me make my life better. I'm not going to charge you a lot of profit. You just have to pay a little bit to get it here, and then you can use that. And so if Haebin So, if she's the Chinese in that group, and that group needs the paper, and that group needs the pen, the local group is going to be maybe not in love with Haebin So, but they're going to respect that group grows because what Haebin gives. And the group, they don't need to tell the world that Haebin gave them the pen. The rest of the country is going to say, "Oh, wow, where did you get that pen? That's a nice pen." And they're going to say it's because I'm powerful, period. And as they grow, they need more pens. So they ask Hebinso, they ask the local Chinese, can I have some more pens? Sure, I'll keep giving you many, many pens, as many as you want. You can sell to other people. So that local group of 9 people, they use all of those pens, they use all of those books to sell them to everybody else in the country. And those people become rich and powerful. But what happens to Miss So? What happens to that rare Chinese person that was quiet at the back of the room and all they did was pen? What would happen to you, Miss So? If you were that situation, would you be happy? Or would you feel just everything is bad? Give them the pen and then leave.
Actually, I didn't clearly understand the situation, so I'm just gonna wait for the other's opinion first.
Okay, so we are trying to imagine, we're trying to live a case study to understand how people can grow. And using the exact situation, the Chinese in China were starving. The government made them farm the land. They made them make factories. They made them make pens and paper for everybody to grow and develop in China. And so you, from that country, you see things are developing, but it's still very hard. So you left and you went to a new country. And then you introduced your family works in those factories in China, making the pens. So I can introduce, my family can get the pens, I can give it to you, you can use it, you can sell it to anybody you want and make high profit. So, Chuk Song, can you guess? Is that a good situation to be in? Or do you think it would suck? The person just takes the pens and then throws you away. What would be smart for you to do, Juk Song? If you were that isolated person working as an individual foreigner surrounded by the other locals that are also maybe not great, maybe dangerous.
Well, for the case of me, I'm a Korean who has a really high uncertainty avoidance. So for me, that would be a bad situation because I'm really not comfortable with unfamiliar situation. But so to survive, I think I would try to get friendly with foreigners as soon as possible by having some food together or having some play or or playing together, things like that. So
let's look at the specific example. You are in a group of 9 other foreigners, 9 Indonesian people or 9 Philippine people around. You're the only one that's not a local, but you're also the only one that can get pens and paper. So how are you going to use that to help you?
In the specific way, I think I'm not sure in the specific way.
Okay, good. Thank you for saying that. Let's change the situation a little bit. Rather than just a small group of 9 students, let's say Ho Jin Chun is an individual. You are a normal person. You have family that makes the pens. You have family that makes the books. And you go into Vietnam. There are almost no other Koreans in Vietnam. There's almost no other Chinese in Vietnam. And you're one of the only foreigners there. But you see they want to develop their education. You see they need pens, they need papers. And you have some cousin that works in a factory that makes pens. What can you do? Ho Jin Chun?
We can ask for help.
Okay, ask who? You're using, Edward Hall says high context, low context. Saying help is nice, but you need to use more words. What do you mean, help who? Who do you ask for help?
Help to the cousin.
Right, so you ask your cousin, please give me more pens. Great. And what are you, yes, what are you going to do with those pens? Do you give them to any poor student in the country, in Vietnam? Or do you give them to the government or the powerful companies? Like the Vin Group is one of the most powerful companies in Vietnam. Do you find the most powerful companies and people in the country and give it to them and let them sell to students and let them sell to companies locally? And do you compete with those big powerful companies and you sell directly, or do you just sell to the big companies? What do you think is smarter, safer for you?
Or safer way?
High context, low context, we need more words to understand what you're trying to say. Please explain what you're trying to say.
So sorry, I don't understand your question.
Okay.
Professor?
Yes.
I don't know whether I'm clear on the questions or not, but if I was on the situation, then maybe I'll try to contact with the company, the powerful company, to sell my product to the company, like B2B strategy, because I do not have enough Guanxi in that culture. So first of all, I'm gonna make Guanxi with the powerful company, and then if I can enlarge my own business, then maybe I am going to separate from the company and sell it directly to the market.
Yes. So that whole concept of being able to identify who is powerful in that country, and you help them grow. You help those people become successful. You become their supplier, their main supplier. So the more they grow, the more you will grow. So because you help the dictator, the president, or you help the Samsung of the country, or whoever's the giant conglomerate, you help them, they are going to help you grow, because if you stop, they can't get any more pens. Yes, by helping those people grow, you both grow and you are protected. But you let Samsung say Samsung is number one, and they don't really promote you. It's a secret relationship with you. So Samsung secretly helps protect you because all of the supplies are going through you, and because they're selling so much, you get successful too. You get super rich too. So let's start talking a little bit more about that. By providing the raw materials to the powerful people, those powerful people can grow because you are supplying them, and they protect you. And as the powerful people get rich and more wealthy, you are providing the details, you are supplying them, so you get rich too, but in the background. And everybody you're trying to help, so anybody that does grow and become powerful is an extra source of protection for you. So now let's take a look at what that means. In Thailand, it's one of the only countries around China that was nice. Maybe we can say everybody wants to go to Phuket or Bangkok for partying. Thailand's always been the same way, welcoming to the foreigners. Thailand was the only country which was not hostile to the Chinese. It was opposite of Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia. The Chinese have been regarded as the full-fledged members of Thai society. Some people say the king or the emperor of Thailand is part Chinese. They have Chinese blood. So the development policy of Thailand has also provided opportunities for the ethnic Chinese. It's limiting the introduction of foreign banks, preventing those already there from building branches, domestic branches, from flourishing. So there was some difficulty, but it's one of the friendliest environments for the Chinese. So what is this Chineseness? What is this Guanxi? There's a bunch of information here, but I'm pointing out the main thing is that the Chinese, just like you students, you must stick together. You must work together, do your projects together, share your research together, just like the Chinese. Develop your Guanxi. You live in not so friendly environments. Long time ago, that's the Chinese, but nowadays, with coronavirus, it might be similar. So learn to rely on these people around you. Learn to rely on me, your teachers, your classmates. Learn that when your classmates go to other countries, those people can help you a lot. Learn who are the factories in Korea, who are the manufacturers in Korea, who can help provide you with technologies or products when you go to these other countries. In response to the discriminatory measures, the Chinese have followed the principle of caution. Don't go abroad and be like the Americans and brag saying, I am number one, America's best. A lot of people usually don't like that. You should go abroad, just like the Chinese. If we see a Chinese in a company, if you think in the back of your mind, what is the stereotype of a Chinese when you see them in a company, working in a company or in a restaurant? Some people will say, well, the Chinese is usually the janitor, or the Chinese is the doorman, or the Chinese is just the person working, doing the dirty work, building the railroad. So people think the Chinese are the simple people, not the target successful people. So the Chinese follow that principle of caution. Don't brag and hedge your bets. You supply the one government office, but you also supply some of the other major corporations. So if one corporation fails, you have these other major corporations that can also use your product and help you. And avoid the publicity. While some people say it's embarrassing to be a janitor, it's embarrassing to be a laborer, the reality is that person is getting very successful and powerful friends and getting rich, and nobody really worries about you. So you can get rich and successful without the attention. So avoid that publicity. That is a good thing. Usually, the more public you are, the more publicity you get, the more crazy people will be attracted to you. Give me some money, or you cheated me, or you had a sexual affair with me, I want to sue you, or I worked for you and you did something bad, so now I want to sue you. If you are a quiet person, you don't have those headaches. So learn from that Chinese sense of Chineseness. It still stands going forward today. To turn their competitiveness toward non-Chinese majorities, they consolidated their cooperativeness and networks. So cooperate with your alumni, cooperate with the other people like you, cooperate. Chinese people are very powerful when they're abroad. Any country you go to, there will be a Chinese association that is very, very powerful. Korea is the same. When you are Korean going to any other country in the world, it would be pretty easy to find an association of Korean people. And those people are super powerful because they help each other. They use the Guanxi. So leverage that. Start with your student network, your alumni. Some older person that graduated from your university that is in a foreign country with you is technically like an older brother or sister to you, so they have to help you. Use that, grow from that. Next, finally, there are lots of hardships migrating. So the initial hardship of migrating has cultivated values for economic survival, such as be pragmatic, have a hard work ethic, be thrifty, don't waste money, don't charge crazy high profits. If you sell to one person and have $10 profit, what is better? Selling to one person for $10 profit or selling to 10 people for $1 profit? Or selling to 100 people for just a small percent? It's much better to sell to many people for a small amount. Because if one customer goes bankrupt, you still have 99% of your other source of income. Versus in North America, if they only have one customer and they're charging a high price, as soon as that customer leaves, they go bankrupt. So the American idea of charging high markups is very dangerous. The Chinese way of just charging 1% profit and supplying to many people, it's much, much safer. And especially if you let the other person use you as a core supplier, they will love you and help you grow. So that is the overall Chinese value. Some people don't like the Chinese. They think they're just dirty workers or they're not educated workers. Well, they're making that image, some people say on purpose. It's very, very smart. Consider some of those details. Let's take a look. Can you guys see this well? This is a slide from 2009, more than 10 years ago. And what it's showing is what? Shiraz Hassan, are you there yet? No? Shokabos Amuratov, are you in class yet? No, still not in class? Juksong, are you still in class? Can you guess? What do you see? What is this slide showing you?
Well, for my opinion, I think this slide shows the, how do I say? The Chinese population in the 3 countries and their welfare system.
Yes. So what you see is a very, very small amount of people are there, but they control almost all of the power and money and assets in the country. So you are powerful as a powerful secret supplier to the key target people. You must find who do you want to develop a relationship? What do they want? Most people want information. So as a student, if you use your other students to collect information, collect research articles, and share that with whoever you want to develop a relationship with, that person might love you. Same thing as the Chinese many, many years ago. So 2% of the people in China, 2% of people in the Philippines are Chinese, but that 2% controls 70% of the money. 4% of people in Indonesia control 75% of the money. 8% of people in Thailand are Chinese and they control 80% of the country. Let's look at this next part. This is a new article. That last article that I just showed you was from 2009. This is showing new stories from last year. It was just published last month. And take a very good look at this. The number of ethnic Chinese is kind of interesting. Look at these circles. In Singapore, most people are ethnic Chinese. In Malaysia, 23% are Chinese. But in Vietnam, only 1% of people in Vietnam are Chinese. In Thailand, it's 14%. In the Philippines and Indonesia, it's only 1% of the country are Chinese. But who cares? So what? Take a look at the numbers. The numbers show where the power is, where is the money. So let's look at all of the money in Indonesia or Philippines. In Indonesia, there's 21 billionaires. They have $78 billion. In the Philippines, there's 17 billionaires. They have almost $50 billion, $49.6 billion. So what? Who are those billionaires? Let's check the ethnic Chinese in Indonesia. 12 of them out of 21 are Chinese in Indonesia. Those 12 people have $60 billion, $59 billion versus $78 billion in the whole country. So that small number of Chinese controls most of the country. Let's look at the Philippines. Philippines is even more shocking. there's 15 ethnic Chinese billionaires in the Philippines versus there's only 17 billionaires in the whole country. So only 2 are Filipino or non-Chinese. That means you Chinese control almost all of the country. Think about that. You are a small little person. You're Wangta. You're alone in a foreign country. But because you have used your Guanxi, because you have used your alumni connections, because you use your classmates and your family, you have brought some value and helped those rare, powerful people get super powerful. And while they got super powerful, you got powerful too. So use that. Use your class activities to join that. I'm going to pause on this for a little while. I want you guys to talk about this. Think about this. What does this mean? So where was easy to live as a traveler, as a Chinese traveler or as a Korean traveler? Where might be hard to grow, but where is the most profitable? Where in the past and where today? I think those are interesting questions. What do you think is interesting when you look at this image, when you look at this research? What do you find interesting here? Can I get any students to comment on this? Maybe just repeat some of these details. What is impressive? What is interesting to you? Shokabos Amuratov or Shiraz Hassan, any chance you're in class yet? Not in class yet? Hibin So, any comments from you?
For me, the number of billionaires who are dominating the wealth in those countries are much more smaller than my expectations. So that was the thing I was really shocked at, first of all. And yeah, and I cannot see what kind of fields they are dominating, like what kind of field of the business they're dominating, basically.
Generally, okay, good. That's good. But at these sizes, they're so big. They're doing every business. Like Samsung makes semiconductors. They make cars. They make buildings. They make food. They make clothes. These big people are similar everywhere. I can't easily imagine. I don't have $1 billion in my pocket, but I can think if I have $1 million, yeah, I can buy a nice house. But if I have $1 billion, I can't think of all the things I could buy. There's so many things you must invest in. You do everything. So yes, but when you start small, you usually start with simple things like pens and papers or basic concepts, simple things. You provide the raw material to the other people to grow with. So many people love Apple phones, but who makes Apple phones? Where are most of the iPhones made? The components of the iPhone are almost dominated by Samsung. Samsung not only makes their own cell phone, but Samsung also makes almost all of the iPhone components. So by doing that, no matter what happens, as long as Apple is growing and the other big cell phone companies are growing, Samsung's going to grow too. So that's the same concept. Samsung is growing the same way as the ethnic Chinese were growing a long time ago. Thank you. Any other comments? Miss So, can you pick one of your classmates? Make sure they understand or appreciate this.
Instead of picking someone, I have one question, because like there is no status quo for the Myanmar. Is that because they don't have enough infrastructure for the businesses compared to the other
Okay,
countries?
that's a good question. So why is there no information in Myanmar, or why is there almost no information in Vietnam? Let's back up. How many people in class have a friend, or have you seen stories of people going to Thailand? Probably everybody. Everybody knows some stories of people that went to Thailand. What about Singapore? Everybody's been to Singapore. Indonesia, maybe you've heard a lot of people go to Bali, Indonesia. So in the Philippines, you hear stories. Malaysia, you hear stories. But Vietnam is new. Vietnam just started to become popular the last several years. And Myanmar, probably nobody here, or maybe only one or two people, maybe I'm the only one that has been to Myanmar or Vietnam. So it's the same thing. People don't know about those areas. They haven't gone to those areas, so they aren't developed yet. So that's a good question. So what are you going to be interested in? What should you notice? Because nobody else is there, that's where you should target. There's less competition. If you go there, it's easier for you to provide other information. You have the education because Vietnam education is not very advanced, or Myanmar education is really, really new. You can teach them a lot. You can help them a lot. You can introduce them to a lot of products and services and technologies there. So yes, Myanmar is new. People haven't gone there yet. That's what we're actually seeing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I have one question.
Shoot, go ahead.
Maybe there is nobody there because it's dangerous.
Maybe. It could be, but as we identified with the Chinese, they were being murdered and starving to death in China. In their home, it was also dangerous. But in their home in China, the government said, you must work this job. You must go to this place to get your education or to work. You had no freedom in China, and you didn't have a lot of opportunity to make your own company in China. The government controlled that. But when you go to a new environment, even though it might be harsh, even though it might be dangerous, at least you are free to supply other people. You're free to be an agent and introduce the local companies to the Korean technologies or the rich, powerful suppliers that you know of. So everywhere could be considered dangerous. It's easier opportunity when you go into a new market.
Yes, well, it is something that I will not comment and I will not ask, but I can only think that there are a lot of other influences that are coming alongside with this economic influence and power. And I'm talking here to the political influence, to the military influence on all these areas, because they have local influence and local economic power. But maybe we don't want to comment on this.
Okay, the overall idea I would like to sort of stress is that when you stay home, when you stay in your home country, you are competing against twins. Everybody in your elementary school, middle school, high school, university class is almost in a similar situation. When you are trying to get connections to go see the government, you are nothing special. You're just a regular young student with no experience. And so the government might not talk to you, or the CEO of a famous company might not talk to you because you're just a regular young student that doesn't have experience. But if you're a foreigner in a foreign country, usually you stand out. Many times you stand out, and that's bad because it will pick on you. But also, if you're the first person there, then the powerful people generally want to learn and try something new. So the powerful people might invite you to go there and share things or share stories with them. And that's where you can share these details and start supplying them with your context. So nowadays in 2020, we have the internet, we have connections, we have people anywhere in the world able to do coding and outsourcing. But the idea of being an individual foreigner, scouting out new environments, being able to identify powerful people and help those powerful people become more powerful people, it's usually a pretty good rule to live by. So use our classwork to understand those details. We have gone through more than enough time for the class today. I just wanted to thank you guys for participating in today's class. And I want to remind you, make sure you share your articles, make sure you share your research, make sure you register the points you get sharing that before week 8. With that said,
I have one question. How many points?
All right. By the way, everybody knows class is definitely finished now, but as usual, I will stay and help answer questions anytime. Go ahead, Mr. Kim.
I want to know how many points for today's presentation.
You tell me. The rule is for a weekly topic, if you just share questions and information in the week, you get 1 point each week. If you're crazy good, maybe you can negotiate more. But if you also share your research project information or questions about that, you can get 5 points from the 3rd week proposing your research information. There's 5 points available, and there's 5 points extra for just sharing what you found or what you're working on. And you need to do that before the 8th week or by the 7th week. So there's 5 points for sharing your research and 1 point for just simple questions related to today's topic.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.